Hey, what's going on, everybody? Andrew here, back for our build review show. It is Monday, November 18th of 2024. And on this show, I bring users' builds up live on stream, giving them personalized feedback and advice about things that I think that they should do or change in their building process to hopefully make their lineups better, increase their post-contest sim ROIs, and help them enter and submit stronger lineups into their contests. So we do this show twice a week. We do this show typically on Mondays and Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern. If you ever want to get signed up for a show, all you need to do is drop your DK username in the office hours channel in our Discord server. Let me know what sport and slate you want me to review, and I will add you to the list for the next show. But for today, we have 4 people signed up here at the moment. Our first one up is going to be RB1 Smitty, and we are going to be reviewing last Thursday's NFL Showdown contest. So let's pop over there. If you guys remember that one was with the Commanders and the Eagles. So let's get that up on the screen. All right, so let's go to the contest tab. Looks like there's a number of different builds here. We'll jump into all of these. So let's start. I'm pretty comfortable with the mix of contests here and what's going on. So a lot of good stuff there. Don't mind it at all. All low stakes, one shot at the big one. It's cool. All right, so I'm going to read through some of these build names first. So looks like the first one is 20 max, no Hertz captain, build 2 with rules, build 3 with Hertz, build 1 normal, optimizer mode, and then a separate build 1. So there's a ton of stuff going on here. It looks like they're testing different things out in different contests, right? So like we see build 2 was used in the mini max, and then 20 max no Hertz captain was used in the quarter jukebox. 20 max, I'm sorry, build 3 with Hertz was used in a dime time, right? So I think what we should probably do is review these 3 contests specifically and see what like the major differences between them are. So we're going to start with the dime time with the build 3 with Hertz. So let's load this up. Go to users. Got RB1 Smitty here, 20 lineups, sim ROI. And I'm going to make some notes as we go. All right. So which one's this one? So build 3 with Hertz, negative 4.6% sim ROI. And then what do we got? We have 49.3K salary, 8 average dupes. Let me just make it up. 20 lineups, 3 unique, 13 under 5, 85.6 sim average score. Okay, so those are the major details from build 3. Let's go to 20 max no Hertz captain, quarter jukebox. Okay, RB1 Smitty, 20 sim ROI. Quarter jukebox is 20 max, no Hertz captain. All right, what do we see? All right, negative. I'm going to just round up 8% sim ROI. 49, about 49, 4K salary, 20 lineups, 16 average dupes, 5 unique, 9 under 5 dupes, 84.93 sim average score. All right. One more. This one's going to be the Mini Max. All right. So this one is build 2 with rules. Negative 5.5% sim ROI. 10 lineups. 48.5 salary. 14 average dupes. 3 unique. 5 under 5 dupes. 84.33 sim average score. Okay, so the first thing that I find super interesting, and I think this is like a good approach, right? Testing out different types of what's the word I'm looking for? Testing out different types of strategies across these lower stakes contests, right? Is something that we talk about regularly. Now, what I find super interesting, right, is that you have 2 sets of lineups that have very similar salaries, right? 49.3 and 49.4. Well, between those two, and one you went no Hertz captain, and then the other one you allowed the Hertz captain, right? In the no Hertz captain, you had 16 average dupes, but with Hertz captain, you had 8 average dupes. Now, I don't remember if he was like the most popular or like what was going on there, right? So I just want to go see what the ownership projections were. So Hertz was second highest owned captain. Now, I'm not 100% like sure why you chose Hertz specifically over maybe like Saquon, who had like a little bit higher ownership projection, or maybe like you didn't group both of them together. Not 100% sure. But either way, still interesting, right? So same salary, different captains. It was interesting that you got even higher duped in the one where you took Hertz out. Maybe you got to more Barkley in that one. That was the no Hertz captain. So let's see who your captains were, right? Okay, yeah. So it looks like when you took Hertz out, you exclusively got Saquon, right? That makes sense. He was the highest owned captain on the slate. I think he was a little bit better value than Hertz was too, like 2 value versus 1.9. So even if you removed him, the builder just basically took all of that allocation and put it to Saquon. So then let's go to build 3 with Hertz. This is the same salary one, but less dupes. So this one you allowed both. And for one reason or another, you got to like a pretty nice blend, right? Like, okay, yeah, Hertz and Barkley made up like 10%. I'm sorry, 10 out of 20 lineups. But then the other 10 lineups were a mix of other players on the slate, right? I bet you that probably had something to do with it not being so concentrated on the highest owned captain. And then build 2 with rules is actually really interesting because average salary there is 48.5, right? So this is like 900 less than the other 2 builds. Yet the average dupes here is 14. So it's still really high, right? So even if you sacrifice $900 in salary, the dupes only went down by 2 here. Or you could look at it if you gave up 800 in salary, but your dupes actually went up, which is, again, super, super interesting. All right. So this one, it looks like you allowed all captains. And Saquon was your third highest exposed. Hurts wasn't exposed at all. You had mostly Jaden Daniels here. And then you have 7 rules. So there's a geo-mean rule, which we understand. I'm going to try and open one of these up. If at least 2 Washington pass catchers used no more than 1 pass catcher from Philly. The fun names of these rules are funny. Basically like only 1 pay down from Washington, only 1 pay down from Philly. I'm assuming this 2 Philly is just a reverse of the other rule. If at least 2, no more than 1. Max 1 Eagle pass catcher. So I don't have a lot of like opinions on these rules. I think they're fine if you want to use them. I think it's okay. It seems like you're guaranteeing a 2-1 stack specifically in your lineups, right? Like, you have that rule written both ways. So it seems okay. The geo-mean rule looks good. So I think this is just like a good example of like how lineup construction comes into play with duplication here. I think probably what's happening though, and let's look at some of these other builds. This was build 2 with rules. Let's look at build 3 with Hurts. Okay, all the same rules. If I'm reading this right. So it looks like you used all of the same rules across all of the builds, but you just maybe controlled the player pool a little bit more. So they shouldn't be that different, which is why I think the sim ROIs are coming in like fairly close to each other. So that makes sense. Now, I see like a trend here, right? Like 84.33 sim average score, 84.93, 85.6, like kind of all within this like really tight range. And I'm wondering, what do some of the other sets at the top look like? My hunch here is that maybe you're sacrificing too much projection with the rules, like the rules are causing you to get to lower projected sets. It could be coming from the geo mean. I didn't see like a flag in there for like projection at like any point. So I think at some point in there, you're sacrificing too much projection. Now, it could be a number of things, but I think the biggest thing here, right, is that the 84.93 sim average score compared to the top ROI sets of like 87.8, 93, 88, 89, 89, 88. We do see an 82 here, but that's probably more an exception than anything, right? 87, 87. That's like the only one below 86 out of like the top 15 users here. So I think we need to figure out a way not to sacrifice so much projection. And what I would probably recommend is one of 2 things. You could leave the rules and use a projection filter to if you're going to cut with geo-mean the rule, well, we need to counterbalance that somehow to bring the projection up, right? So you could use a projection filter. You could use a projection aggregate rule. you could lower the impact that geo mean is having, because I think 21, I don't know exactly the contest you were optimizing for, or like how many dupes you were shooting for, but it could be that the geo mean is too aggressive, right? So you might want to work backwards there. I think an experiment you could probably do is say, okay, the highest ROI sets had a projection floor of about X, right? And I would probably say like 86 is like a fine number. You could rerun builds with your geomean rule at different dupe values, at like 10 dupes, 20 dupes, 30 dupes, 40 dupes, and basically see like at what dupe threshold you're closer to that aggregate metric. So you continue to use the average projection here. And it's like, hey, when I do 10 dupes, I'm closer to like 83 sim average score, yet my lineups are still coming in duplicated, 5 to 15 times in a contest. Maybe I need to get maybe I need to loosen the geo mean to get higher projection, closer to 85, closer to 86, right? And kind of play with builds, play with numbers, running it over and over again. I definitely think that's a good idea. Another option, well, we said the average projection lineup filter, the average projection aggregate rule, the testing your geo mean number across, testing geo mean numbers and cross-checking them with your aggregate projection, aggregate metrics. Oh, another one would be removing the rules one at a time, or removing them all, adding them one at a time, and seeing what like the net impact is on average, right? So it's like, hey, when I have one rule selected, my metrics are coming in at this number, but when I have these 4 rules together, well, now it's tanking my projection and bringing it way down, right? What combination works? What combination? Which one should I maybe remove? If I remove one, does it help it? Do I need to remove 2, right? And kind of try and balance that all out. So I think between the geo mean aggregate rule, the projection suggestions, and then testing the rules, comparing against the aggregate metrics, you're going to get closer to where you're trying to go. So give that a shot. Let me know how it goes. It is going to require like a lot of time, like building, checking, rebuilding, but you're trying to dial in your process, right? So that's where I would start. And if you have more questions, let me know. But looks like Smitty's here. So appreciate the kind words. Hope that helps. All right. Good stuff there. And going to be moving on to our next person, who's going to be Chris, who I think Chris is here in the YouTube channel. Answer the question right now once I get them up on the board. But we're going to be reviewing Sunday's NFL main slate and diving into their lineups. All right. So let's go over to Sunday. And let's get this up on the screen. All right. Chris said, newbie here. Most of the trainings show to use ROI. Why not win rate or projections? Is it just because of dupes? Good question. So I was actually talking about both of these things at some point today. So win rate, if you think about it, like, this is how I explained it to another user. I'm like, is a lineup that gets second place bad? It's like, no, probably not, right? Second place probably pays a lot of money. It's a really nice score, and you got to be happy with it, right? Win rate doesn't care about your second place finish like at all, right? Win rate, if a lineup comes in second or a lineup comes in 100th, it doesn't matter, right? But ROI accounts for all positions paid, cashing rate of a lineup, and winning rate of a lineup. So ultimately, a lineup's win rate has a big effect on the ROI, but the ROI also, captures all places paid that are also not first place. And then projection, plenty of tens of thousands of entrants in the contest. When you do that, not only do you need to get into the top 1% of a contest, right? You need to get into the top 0.1. You need to get in the top 0.001. Take a contest that's 10,000 people, right? Well, top 10% is 1,000. So top 1% is 100. Top 10 is the top 0.1%. And then first is top 0.01%, right? And projection is the average projection of the lineup. I mean, average projections are not going to win you a GPP, right? You need upside outcomes. You need Taysom Hill when he scores 3 touchdowns, one time in a season, right? Like that's not something he does often, right? That is, his true ceiling, like the highest points that he's going to score. Those are the outcomes you're kind of hunting for, right? So we don't ever recommend using average projection unless you're playing cash games, simply for the reason that you need to finish so high in a contest to take it down. All right, let's jump into this review. Going over to the contest tab. Contest selection looks good. Nice, solid balance between single entries and 3 maxes. Couple shots in the flea flicker, no worries. Couple shots in the millie. I think that this is a fine contest selection here. Now, let's review the contest. Let's see if we can get the mini max to load here. It is a lot of entries. Might take a minute here, but seems okay. And just waiting for this to load still. Big contest. Sometimes you'll get this message. If you just click wait, should give it enough time to finish. So looks like it's loaded up now. Great. Users, Chris here. Let's close these other tabs. Okay, so we're going to look at people who entered 150 lineups, sorted by sim ROI. So good news, right? Chris is 25.7% positive sim ROI. Highest sim ROIs are like somewhere around 35%. So they're more toward the top than they are toward neutral or toward the bottom. So this is really good, right? Especially being new to Saber Sim. This is a very positive start. Now, what do we see, right? What are the major differences here? So they use a lot of salary. That's cool. Average dupes is 0. It's good. Sim average score 128. This isn't terrible. We see other ones 129, 131, pushing 132, 130, 130, 131, 130, 131, 131. So a lot of these top ones are like 2 points projected higher, which shows that, projection does matter, right? But there's always kind of a range, right? We see 121.1, we see 131.99, right? Kind of anywhere that is like a 3-point little gap there. But all of those lineups are grading out well. Looks like yours are just slightly below that, but nothing too significant, right? So I don't see a lot here that is like concerning. Let's go into the build. I'll say one thing that stands out to me. Actually, 2 things that stand out to me. Number 1 is that these lineups were built about 3.5 hours prior to lock. I think that's okay, but I would just check to make sure no relevant news comes out leading up to lock. And I'm almost positive this week there was relevant news, right? So one of the best places to be is in our Discord in the NFL lineup alerts channel, where when a sim finishes, we summarize leading up to lock if any players moved, right? So if their projection goes from 13 to 15, we're going to summarize that information, right? I think there were a couple people who got ruled out or ruled inactive, or were like, there was, some late line movement and things like that. I did see a number of significant projection changes in the Discord. So if you see those, I would recommend rebuilding, like when players get ruled out and stuff, because it affects other players on the slate. So that would be my first thing, right? I think it's fine to build lineups in the morning, but I would just check it. And then if there is, news coming in, I would then do a rebuild. So that's the biggest thing here, right? Second thing, and then, there's a question here. So I reran at 11:20 a.m. Do I need to rebuild or just refresh? So if you refresh, what a refresh does is it just resorts the lineup. So if there was a player in your top lineup, they get ruled out. Well, we're going to update the projection, and then that's going to affect the grading of the lineup, right? If their projection goes down, then the lineup's going to go down in your pool. I would recommend a rebuild. I'm just going off this timestamp here. It looks like it was about 9:20 a.m. Eastern. So it's possible that maybe the timestamp's wrong. Just going off the information I have. The second thing I would recommend here is late swapping your lineups. So it doesn't look like there's a late swap build open. So you always, especially being on the Ultimate subscription, you want to re-optimize your lineups before the afternoon games lock. And the reason for that is because we are taking in the players' actual scores and using those in our live contest sim. So when you are contest simming before the afternoon window, we are not using, Jared Goff's pre-game projection. We are saying, hey, Jared Goff has 37 points, and that is the score he is getting in the contest sim. And the lineups that have him are probably doing a lot better than all the other lineups. So when a slate is in progress, we are using live scores. So that's another really good reason to take advantage of late swapping and use the live sims, because if your lineups have them, great. The builder is going to optimize them one way. If your lineups don't have him, okay, the builder is going to have to do some other things in the lineup to try and catch up to the lineups that have him in it, right? So late swapping, super, super important. Now let's jump into a build, or the build you used. Okay, 5K lineups, default minimax salary, no filters, no rules, no lineup filters, autofill, ROI, unique rank, sorted by prize pool. That's good. One exposure cap to Jacoby Myers. That just looks like some risk management. Seems good. One to Aaron Rodgers. Again, risk management. No minimum exposure. Okay, good that you're doing those changes in the all tab. Nothing in running back. Nothing in receiver. Nothing in tight end. Nothing in defense. Allowing all stack types, all game stacks, all team stacks. Okay, so pretty hands off here, right? So if I were to make any suggestions, right, our goal kind of right now is to get you slightly higher projected, right? Well, with such a hands off build, only like a few risk management decisions here. There's a couple things that you can do. Number one, I would recommend is increasing your minimum salary, right? You could take this from 48.5, you could take it to 49,000, you could take it to 49.5. Salary and projection are typically correlated, so that's just going to help you to get a little bit higher floor. The other thing that you could do, right, that I've recommended to other users in the past, is do a lineup filter where you are filtering out the bottom 10% to 20% of lineups in projected score. So if those lineups just simply aren't available, then the builder is not going to play them, right? So you come in here to lineup filters, you say show lineups with projection greater than X. Basically just like make up a number and then watch how many lineups go in the trash, and then just keep changing the number until the number of lineups in the trash is about 10 to 20% of your pool. And that will typically raise the average projection of your set of lineups as well. Again, you're really close to like that threshold, so I don't think there's a lot to do. You're also positive 25% ROI, and we said, 35% is a good place to get to. So, I'm suggesting two small things because I don't think you need to change a lot, right? You're doing a lot of the right things already, pretty hands off, moving in the right direction. So this is a very positive review here, and try those things out and let me know how they go. All right. Good stuff there. Next person up is going to be Will, and we are going to be reviewing NHL. So that'll be pretty interesting. Always interesting doing NHL reviews from time to time here. Always a little bit different too. So let's get NHL up. And actually, this is going to be on FanDuel, which will be interesting. So let's go to Saturday. Looks like there was a 10-game hockey slate over on FanDuel. All right. So we're going to start in the contest tab as always. Okay. So let's talk about this, right? They're putting 10 lineups into effectively like the hockey flagship. I'm calling it flagship because it is the highest total prize contest here that I can see. The lobby just looks like a little small in general, right? There's like a 10K prize pool. There's a 2K, and then it drops into like the hundreds, right? Like 500, 600, etc. Right. So I understand like the want to, hit like a 4-figure score. I did talk to Will like a little bit before the show, and I think like the DK lobby is like a little bit healthier if you're so inclined and you're in a state where you can play DK. DK might be a little bit better. I've talked to Scott on our team, who is our resident hockey expert on the team here, and he's told me that he's taking most of his action off of FanDuel and mostly plays DK as well. So that could be a really good start. You might be able to get access to like some lower stakes contests that are actually decent prize pools, right? Because like I would love to see you playing under $3 where the Sharks can't play, playing like the 25-cent, the $1, the $2 contest. But like, man, the prize pools are just so minor. Like I understand why you're not playing it. So possibly moving over to DK, possibly playing the lower stakes contest over there to start, right? Like start with contests under $3. That'd be a great place to play. You're going to get more lineups down, which is always really good. You'll also get access to our contest flashback feature. We can start reviewing your post-contest sim ROIs and actually getting a little bit more objective opinion about how your lineups are doing in your contests. So that's one thing. Because in case anybody didn't know, we don't have the contest flashback tool on FanDuel because they don't allow us to download their contest data. But either way, let's jump into this build. All right. So what do we see here? So I say the first thing here that's interesting is there's a lot of teams X'd out, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams X'd out, and there are 20 teams on the slate. So about like 25% of the teams on the slate like want nothing to do with them, right? I don't know where these opinions come from. Maybe it's just looking at like goal totals. I see like 2.7, 2.8, 2.5. There's one high one, 3.3. I thought maybe they were just like Xing the lowest totals, but like Detroit's allowed at 2.4. So I'm not 100% sure where some of these like notions are coming from. I think the important thing to remember, right, is that let's take the contest, even the contest you're playing. All right. So there are, wrong button, 2,681 entries here, right? So you are trying to beat out the other 2,681 entries, right? If you remove your 10, it's 2,671, right? So that is still, a lot of entries that you have to beat, right? even if a player, even if a team is showing up as optimal in the sim 1% of the time, I mean, guess what? That's a 1 in 100 outcome, right? You're trying to achieve a 1 in 2,500 outcome, right? So, that's something like I'll tell people when they're talking about like, hey, should I X team stacks, or should I never play a tight end with like in the flex, or should I never play two running backs from the same team, or like, all these kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Just like rule of thumb type of rules. Like there's a certain word for it. I can't remember it off the top of my head. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. But just any of these like rules of thumb, or these just like rules that like work most of the time, where it's like, okay, yeah, two running backs from the same team, like probably not going to work out all the time. But the good thing about having a play-by-play sim is we're going to put those type of lineups into your pool at the rate that they show up optimal. So it's not like you're just going to get a bunch of those, but it's like, hey, if, two running backs from the same team is showing up as optimal, even 0.5% of the time, you're going to get 1 in 200, and you're building 500 lineups, right? So you maybe get like 5 of those total, or 2 of those total, or 3 of those, 2.5, whatever it is. The odds of that occurring and working according to our sims is still higher than the raw chance of you winning the contest at, 1 out of, 2,500 plus, right? So I wouldn't recommend against Xing out all the teams. Even if, you end up playing like a 4-3-1 stack and it's one skater from Dallas, right? That can definitely work out. It could be a defenseman, right? Defenseman just has like a really good game, and those things happen. Like gets one shot on goal and they make it. Like, hey, that's all a defenseman needs sometimes. So I'd probably recommend against the heavily Xing out teams in your player pool, especially once you get into playing more lineups. I think the minimum salary is fine. What's this filter? Show players with ownership less than 15. Ownership is interesting, right? Why is a player being owned at more than 15%? Well, typically, especially in 2024 DFS, the field is pretty sharp, right? The field has like a pretty good sense of players and where they're going to go, and why, who's in a good spot, who's in a bad spot. I don't like Xing out players just because they're high owned. Just because they're high owned, does that mean they're going to have a bad game, right? Or does that mean you have to fade them, right? That's kind of more the question you should be asking. And we answer that for you. We answer that for you through our adjusted ownership, right? So you can come in here, you can sort by ownership. And basically what we're doing, right, with adjusted ownership is we're looking at the player's ownership, and then we're looking at the player's range of outcomes in our sims, which would be this graph. Let me see if I can get it to load by doing a hard refresh. All right, try that again. So Sidney Crosby loads, right? So we're looking at the player's ownership, and then the builder looks at this graph, which is describing how they did in the Sims, and then gives them a score, right? So Crosby 35% owned. Our adjusted ownership is 46. What does that mean? Well, when the adjusted ownership is higher than the ownership, what we're saying is like, hey, this player is not achieving their average projection as often as you would assume, giving their ownership. So this ownership is a little bit high for the rate at which this player actually does well in the Sims. Now, what if they were 10% owned, right? So I dropped Crosby to 10%. Then the builder redoes the calculation like, hey, well, if this guy's 10% owned, we actually think he's actually a fine play, right? Adjusted ownership is matching his ownership. And, we're cool with this, right? So it's not to say Crosby will never get in your lineups when he's 35% owned, but he will get hurt, right? He will get taxed in that scenario. So we did have the build with lineups, but it just like disappeared. Oh, I know what happened. 1 second. All right, here's that build, right? So right now you're using Saber score as your grading metric, right? And we were talking about that adjusted ownership thing. So adjusted ownership is a variable here, right? We are taxing players by providing this negative weight on lineups with high average adjusted ownership. So it is getting taken into account. And sometimes players can do so good in the sims that they even outgrade this, right? Their average projection plus their lineup percentile ends up overpowering their adjusted ownership, and you still want to play them, right? That happens. So I'm not saying like you I personally would not be Xing out every player above 15% owned. So that's something I would change. So the ownership, Xing out the teams, stack 3 players from the same. I would recommend turning this on, must be on the same. And you could select EV or power play line if you don't care. This is always a good rule to have, right? Otherwise, it's just a team rule, but it's always better to have that line correlation. And you can give the builder ability by using even strength or power play line. You just got to click this must be on the same button. So those are the main things I would change as of right now. Now, give those a shot. Let me know how they go. If you move over to DK, we could start to see your post-contest sim ROIs and continue to iterate on the process from there. All right, good stuff. Last one up today is going to be Sammy. We're actually going to be doing some MMA review today, so that's interesting. Usually we are reviewing Sammy's, what is it? NFL Showdown portfolios. So MMA is something different. Sammy must be branching out here. So let's get this pulled up. Right. All right, let's get this up. Let's go to the contest tab. All right, so contest selection. Hammering low stakes looks really good. Let's pull up this mini max here. And we'll go over to users. So Sammy, 150 entries, sort by sim ROI. So negative 1% sim ROI, but honestly, this looks like a pretty low edge contest. Highest is 11%, and then it drops quickly down to 6 to 5 to 3 to 2 to 1. So your sim ROI is always relative to the other players in your contest. That's why some people say like, hey, what's like a good ROI number to hit? It's like, well, sometimes, there really isn't just like this one size fits all answer. And, it's always going to be relative to the contest that you're playing. So remember that part. And then let's see. What you can do is you can reconsider your contest selection, right? So like, okay, this 50 max 50 cent ends up being like kind of low edge here. Is there like a different contest that I can play basically like instead, right? And it's like, hey, maybe I want to try, the $1.20 max, the jab here. Maybe I want to play the $2.20 max. And, those two contests together are still lower entry fees. And, we can like go and look at the jab, right? And then see what like the sim ROIs are. And I'm pretty sure they'll be higher, right? So that is something I would be considering. All right. Now let's jump into your actual lineups here. So we're always trying to find a balance here, right? Dupes, sim average score, those are like two big things that we typically look at. So Sammy, 150 lineups, right? 15 average dupes, 4 uniques, 37 under 5, right? So this is pretty interesting. So we have two different types of players here, right? We have Sig Hemi with 5 average dupes, 50 uniques, and 394 sim average score. So they are getting extremely, extremely unique and sacrificing a lot of projection to do it. Well, the builder likes that, right? That's one way to play. Well, what does somebody who played similar to Sammy look like? 15 average dupes. So let's go find someone close. All right. So there is somebody else with 15 here. There is somebody else with 16 here, right? So this is kind of interesting. The person with 16 has a sim average score of 425, which is like 15 points higher than Sammy's. But again, this is only 2% sim ROI difference, right? And then we see users that are similar to Sammy with like a neutral ROI, right? So like right next to him. So what do we want to do with this information? Well, honestly, to me, what it seems like the best approach is like, yeah, Sig Hemi has the highest sim ROI. But there are a lot of other good positive sim ROIs right below them that take a little slightly different approach where they accept more duplication in their set, but they're playing lineups that are like 15 to 20 points higher projected. There are more users going with the higher sim average score approach than with the low sim average score approach, like according to this, if I just like count them up by hand. So I would say it's probably a little bit better to go that way. And it also raises the floor for you, right? Like Sig Hemi had a negative 92% actual ROI. And a lot of these other users had neutral, negative 12, negative 12, negative 23, negative 2, negative 16. So it raises the floor, right? That way it can be high ROI, but it is also highly volatile, right? So I would be focusing on this other direction here. Now, where do these lineups come from? Build one. All right, so let's go to build one. So MMA is a sport where typically you just build the day of. I would recommend there's usually odds and line movement that changes overnight from like Friday night to Saturday night. Typically anytime Saturday is like a fine time to build. So these lineups look like they were built at like 1 o'clock Eastern about. So it seems fine. All right. So lineups, I don't see them, but we can at least see everything else here. So 5K lineups, 47.5 min, max 50K. I don't know if this is the salary default for MMA. I would be open to lowering it, and opening it up could possibly help you get to some less duplicated lineups. Filters, projection greater than 0. It's just for viewing purposes. Core / best plays. I wanted to say pay-per-view, but I'm pretty sure it's point per value. I'm not 100% sure. There's no players in this rule, which is, they're all down here. So use at least one and just puts a core of players together. I think that's fine. Maybe these are like all favorites where it's like, hey, use at least one favorite in the lineups. It's cool. All right. Use at least one of these 4. I don't have opinions on it. Seems fine. Don't use opposing fighters. Seems fine as well. So all these rules are good with me. No problems. Okay, so it was pay-per-view. So it seems like those fights are like usually like the 5-round fights anyways, right? So you can get some more points in there, control time, takedowns, all those things. So if you want to like, hey, I want to have one from the main card, it's cool. Don't want to have all your fighters be like prelims. I don't see a problem with it. Lineup, ROI greater than 0, I imagine here. So this seems okay, right? Exposure. got to some roughy, a little about matching ownership for like a couple of fighters, John Jones, Tybura, Bo Nickel, not like getting some insane amount of leverage on them. So I think like matching on some fighters is fine, right? You like take an approach like, hey, I want to match on these guys and I want to get leverage somewhere else on the slate. That's like totally fine. So no problem. Aside from that, two things. I don't see anything for duplication here. And then I don't see anything for projection, right? So I think if you add those two things, that can be good, especially if you take my advice and lower minimum salary. So I'd be doing a geomean custom metric and filter, and then a projection custom metric. I'm not a custom metric, just a projection filter to balance those two things out. So you add those two things in, try and get like 10 to 20% of your lineups in the trash for both of them, and try adding that step. But otherwise, all seems well here. And consider changing up the contest selection. So good stuff, Sammy. All right. That was everybody for the Build Review Show. One quick question here or two. Jim said, did you see my Build Review request? I did. I believe I responded to you. If you could get back to me in the office hours channel, that would be great. I responded to you this morning in regards to something I saw. It seemed like a little bit more of like a bug possibly going on with 4,900 lineups going in the trash. So I want to make sure there's nothing weird going on before we spend time reviewing your lineups. So hit me back and we can discuss that further in the Discord. And then one from Noah, quick non-review related question. If I change the projection of a player, then the 99th percentile, etc., does not change. Why is that? It just doesn't change visually. So like if I go in here and change John Jones from 98 to 105, we're not going to update the column and move his 168 to 175, but it is going to change, right? So what happens with the custom projections is that we effectively, we maintain the distribution shape because we think that's highly valuable. And we just shift it. So now when he scores 70, he scores 77. When he scores 100, he scores 107, right? 130, 137. So it does move, but we just don't show it visually in the table here. So just want to clarify that. All right. Appreciate everybody tuning in. I will be back for this show on Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern. If you want to get signed up, drop your DK username in the office hours channel. Let me know what sport and slate you want me to review. But aside from that, I'll see you all tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern for office hours. So until then, everybody, take care. Good luck. Thanks. Bye.